These are true TEQnation diehards. Thank you all for attending this last session. I mean, as a speaker, it's always a bit tricky if there are still people left at the Congress for the last session. So in advance, thank you very much for showing up. And I think we're not going to disappoint you. Me and my colleagues have been here the whole day. We checked out the other sessions about AI and Chat GPT, and I think we are going to bring you something that's a bit different. And of course, there will be some overlaps. I mean, it's the same subject, but I think it's nice. We're going to have a talk about Chat GPT and that it can be your lead developer, and that it's a lead developer that's always there and not every time in a meeting when you need them. I'm not going to do this alone. I brought along two junior developers from my company because I'm an architect, and you know an architect, they know a little bit about a lot of different subjects, and the better they get, they know a little bit more about more subjects. I'm a really good architect, so I know a lot of different subjects, but very little. So I needed to bring some experts. And as ChatGPT is something really new, what better way to have new programmers that are fresh from university, full of ideas. So Bertan and Naval are both super creative with new technologies, picking it up really quick, and they are building their own small prototypes, and they will gonna show you what they have done and how these prototypes can help you as a junior developer understand a new solution better and to dive into the documentation that is there for a big project. But that will come later. I think I'm not the only one that's excited about ChatGPT, what it can bring. It's only been around for half a year, maybe a little bit longer. And I feel this excitement, this same excitement as you're on a roller coaster and the cart is going up and you're about to dive into a whole new experience. Yeah, and it gives you shivers. But with a roller coaster, you know there are some safeguards in place and you expect to get out alive at the end. With ChatGPT and the AI tools, I'm scared, man. I mean, I'm literally scared. I was at the Microsoft Build conference in 2016 in San Francisco, and you know what the big topic there was? Language recognition. And they had it pretty good working in English, but for Dutch or Swedish or Danish, it didn't work. Is that a problem anymore? I mean, I can type in a question in Dutch, and it'll give me the answer in English. If it likes, it gives back the answer in JSON, and I can just store it in the database, no problem. So, yeah, there is a lot going on with ChatGPT, and I'm following some screencasts online about this issue, and it immediately gets to this point of a kind of an apocalypse, and bad things are coming. And you see arguments that are in line with George Orwell's 1984, where this all-encompassing API, the superintelligence, will suffocate the human spirit in a totalitarian way. On the other hand, there's also a group that's arguing more along the lines of Aldous Huxley in A Brave New World. And you get something like a pleasure-fueled mass hysteria where people come to love their oppressions and adore the technologies that will take away their abilities to think. I mean, this picture is from Ex Machina, and some of you have probably seen the movie about the Turing test, and there are also already blog posts saying ChatGPT passed the Turing test. I don't know if it's really true, I don't know if it's really important, but yeah, it's this discussion, and I think it's good as a programmer to be aware of the discussion. I mean, I don't want to turn this into a political debate or the debate about ethics. It's not my place. I'm not the expert, but I do feel some kind of responsibility as a programmer to be aware of what we're doing. And in no way am I saying that Chat GPT has intelligence or is it a sentient being. No way. But yeah, I think we have to be aware of it, and that is the one thing I want to give you to. Would like you to take away from this talk. But I also like to think, what if it's there? I mean, I think some people of culture know what is a message. I see some recognition. But let's just pretend that it's there, that there is this super intelligence and that we can ask it a question. What would we ask it? What would be your question? Does anyone have a suggestion?
What's the meaning of life?
What's the meaning of life? Yeah.
42.
It will be 42, yeah. You want to get super rich, yeah. Don't blame you. Any other ideas? Yeah? How does the human brain work? Maybe it says, I don't know, I am an artificial brain. I saw a podcast online, and they would ask, is there intelligent life? And then the most scary answer would be, it's already, sorry, is there an alien life form? And then the most scary answer would be, it's already on Earth. Well, as you all know, Chat GPT has been developed by OpenAI, and Sam Altman describes Chat GPT as an extension of human will, an amplifier of our ability, and probably the most useful tool ever created. I think it has the promise of being the most useful tool, and if you see what's coming out of Chat GPT extensions being developed, I think last month there were over 100 new extensions being developed. It has that potential, and of course he's not objective about this, but I don't blame him. But in the midst of all these discussions, I came across an article by Cynthia Lim, associate professor at TU Delft, and she published an article in a Dutch newspaper, and she raises the question, does ChatGPT rob us of valuable thinking? And when did we stop to make an effort? And I like this argument, because I think there is something to be said in the struggle. I mean, I remember when I was a high school student, I need to do a paper, and it was a struggle for me, getting all your information, thinking about the sentences you write. I think there's value in that struggle. I think you unconsciously learn other things, and you have some perseverance finishing your job. So I think, yeah, that's a danger of ChatGPT. It's bringing it too easily to you. And I also think she is right along the lines that we are very focused on the outcome. We want to have the result right away, and maybe sometimes step back and also enjoy the process of getting to the outcome. But is the new technology and taking away creativity, is that new? Is that fear new? I here have a picture of a Moog synthesizer, one of the early ones. What I found was that when they were first introduced, session musicians, they were really terrified that these synthesizers would take away their jobs, because they could produce string sounds, they could do horns. And actually in America for a couple of years, the Moog synthesizer was banned for this reason. They didn't want it. Well, today a synthesizer is a part of the music industry, and it doesn't take away anybody's job. So I think it's a kind of normal human reaction to think that new technology will take away creativity right away. Having that said, I think my colleague Bertan and later on Naval will show you that you can be very creative with Chat GPT. And I will now pass over the mic to Bertan.
Thank you. Hello. All right, it's working. Is this good? It's the first time I hear myself with a microphone, so as you can tell, it's also my first presentation like this. But thank you. Same goes for my colleague Naval, I think. So, yeah. Hope you don't mind. Yes. So together we create. Well, first of all, yeah. Well, I'm Bertan. I've been working at Netcompany as a junior developer, and today I'm going to talk quickly about kind of what's happening with AI, but not go into details or too many examples, because I think we've seen examples and you can look it up yourselves as well. I will more focus on how juniors can use AI, and this can be a lesson for other juniors, but also seniors, to give tips to your juniors or managers, if there are any. And a proof of concept that I have been working on, I would like to share. And also a quick discussion on what the future of AI might look like for us as developers specifically, how it might turn out. So, yeah, so right now there is, of course, a boom of AI happening. It mostly started with the release of Chat GPT, but it had been brewing for a few years. And it consists of, large language models. We're all aware of them. GPT, we all know it. But there's also a lot of other ones that I think many of us might not be aware of. Some open source, some not. But as I said, I don't want to go into examples. You can search it up yourself, just to give you an idea that there are other options out there. And Sam Altman actually mentioned that GPT-4, we all know, has a huge database, and that it would be very difficult to get a bigger data set to train GPT-5 on. And so if it comes, it will take probably at least a few years, I guess. And that's why there's a lot of focus on prompt engineering and fine-tuning and creating AI tools with what we have right now, with the models that we have right now. And I think with prompt engineering, there's a few things you can do. Give context to the AI, ask it what you want it to do. You can give it more information, you can give it more data. And you can also create a chain of thought prompting. You can have two AIs talking to each other, have one verify the other one, and you can do quite some interesting things with it to improve performance and stuff like that. And you can fine-tune it and train it further yourself, but that's usually looked down upon, I believe. But I think the most interesting is creating AI tools. So using the prompt engineering and fine-tuning to create a tool that will tackle some sort of issue, and in our case, that is development, of course. And there's a lot of examples, I think we've seen today, quite a few, but dominantly GitHub Copilot. But yeah, of course, there's some other ones as well. Tab9, Codium, you can look up more. And the main thing that they promise, from what I've seen, is code generation. This is what they usually focus on. They will say, I want a function like this, and it will just type it out for you, fill it out. Of course, it also does other things. It can refactor your code, or at least help you refactor it. Give you some new ideas, maybe write some comments about it, or Git messages, or things of that sort. Unit tests, it's also quite, those things are mentioned quite a lot. And I think looking at these, the first thought that we have, as mentioned before, are we going to get replaced? But it can be a scary thought, and perhaps you might start thinking with juniors first, because juniors maybe get offloaded the more easy tasks. Write this function, they will say, and maybe you can just ask AI to do that for you. And seniors, well, they have a few years at least, because they have to babysit the AI. They have to verify it. They have to check it. They have to understand what the AI is trying to say, what kind of ideas is it giving. So at least they're safe for now, right? But yeah, I will put a cap on this for now and move on to what my idea was. And I'll come back to this at the end of my presentation, or at least my part. Yeah, so how can AI help juniors? I think to answer this question, the first thing we have to think about is, what does a junior lack that a senior has? And feel free to put your hands up if you have an answer. What does a junior lack? Experience, yes. Sorry? Creativity, yes.
Big picture.
Sorry?
Big picture.
Big picture view, yes. I like that answer. Yes?
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
Domain knowledge.
Yes. I think these are good answers, and I like the big picture answer that I got. Because let's say you're a junior and you're given a task to work on, and you have a new code base you just started, but it's a huge code base. I mean, you look at it, you're like, what is this? I have no idea what is where. What tech stack exactly are we using? What are the dependencies? And what folder contains what file contains what? How does data flow between these folders? And I like overviews. I like big pictures. If I think of a code base, I will think of it kind of like this mentally, where you might have the tech stack and dependencies, the structure of the folders, what are their naming conventions in the industry that juniors usually might not be aware of. How does the data flow between them, the classes and the files, and of course the functions. I like to get an overview like this, because then if you're given a task, you can kind of zoom in from the broader picture into what you need to implement. And that's the part I wanted to focus on. Yes. So I have actually used Chat GPT by itself to extract the structure of our code base and just give it and ask it, yo, this is the file structure, folder structure that we have, and I need to find out where does this data come from, and where does the API call, where is it being made exactly? From the naming conventions, can you give me an idea where you think I should be looking at? And of course, it's not always right, but it pointed me in the right direction, and I managed to figure out the solution. And basically, I wanted to automate this and make a tool out of it, so to speak. So that starts with, of course, prompt engineering a little bit, where you give it some context, and then you tell it, imagine you're a senior and you want to help a junior figure out the structure of a code base, and ask if the junior is asking you, if I need to find this in the code, where can I look? I think a lot of times when we are juniors, we want to ask this to seniors, but they end up being in meetings a lot, or they don't have time. It's hard to set up a meeting for these kind of things. So I think that's why it's nice to have your own private senior, so to speak. So yeah, basically I've created a VS Code extension. It's not public, it's just a proof of concept, but it has two functions, but the main one was that it recursively crawls the folder structure and the files. And it generates descriptions for all the files and folders. And for the files, if it's small enough, it can also just read the content and give you an overview of what the functions are doing and what the folder might be doing. Of course, they're all just ideas. You shouldn't be taking it as 100% true. But even if it's 50% true, that can give you a lot of ideas. Oh yeah, so before that, I actually want to show you. So I have, to test it, downloaded the VS Code repository. So this is that. I do want to mention that I was using OpenAI's GPT model 3. So there is a rate limit, which slows you down a lot, but since this is a proof of concept, I think you can come up with ideas how to scale this up. Yeah, so I just took a very small folder because you don't have to ask it for the whole database immediately. You can, if you already have an idea, maybe I should zoom in. Yes, I think. So I gave it this small folder, which has 3 folders and a file in it, and asked it to recursively look at it, but also what you can also do is just tell it, give me a description of the file names without giving the content. I think I also have, yeah, there's this one, but it will take a while, so I will, I believe, yes, this one. For the recursive implementation, I just let it run, and I got a result that I can just share immediately, so you don't have to wait for it. This is my slide notes, I think. Yes, so from the start, for each folder, it starts with a description, which is basically a summary of what it says for the files. And within the main folder, you have other folders, of course. So we saw that it had common folder, electron main, and I missed one, I think. But then it had, oh yeah, this electron sandbox, and one file within each folder. And from the system context that I gave it provided, it tries to deduce, look at what functions are being made and try to explain it like it's a senior explaining it to a junior. And we don't have time to, of course, go through this and read it, but as I mentioned, you shouldn't be taking this to heart and believing everything it says, but it does get at least the functions. They're there, I checked, and they do seem to describe, at least give an idea of what it's doing, and then you can, I think we all know that if you have at least sort of an idea of what code is doing, it becomes a lot easier to read it yourself. If you don't know anything what's going on, it just looks like a bunch of mess, at least to me. And so I think if you could extend this and scale it up, you can have a very good way to help juniors without having to always ask seniors or try to consult a documentation that is missing or incomplete, to at least get an idea of what a code base is doing and what is where. And you can imagine that you can extend this where AI has this context, and then you just ask it, I have this task, I need to implement this, add this change or fix this, so where should I be looking? Generate some ideas for me. And it's a good first step. So if I go back to the slide. Oh yeah, I think I also forgot the time. No? Okay. The first thing that I executed, it just looked at the folder names and the file names. And even just from that, so it just looks at, it doesn't crawl it, it just looks at the folder names. But even from that, it can at least deduce, I mean, for example, electron, if you don't know what that is, it will tell you, I think, well, not in this case, but it has told me before. Yeah, not this time, too bad. You can always let it run again and get a different answer, of course, and adjust the temperature. Now I can go back to the last slide. Oh. If I can drag it all the way here. Yes. How can I get my notes? There we go. Yeah, so just to go back to the initial question of are we going to get replaced? But this is just a thought piece, of course. I don't have expertise. I'm just a junior. But it's just something to think about. Well, why are juniors going to be needed? Well, that's because we know that we need seniors in the near future to babysit AIs. And where do seniors come from? From juniors. So we're going to need to make sure that we train juniors to become the next seniors to then use the AIs and babysit them, at least for now. And so I think that's why focusing on training and education of juniors is a good way to think about it for future investment. Yes, so the other thing is AI assistance. As I've already shown a proof of concept, I think you can come up with something fun and helpful. And companies can do this internally for themselves using open source language models and keeping it offline. And I think it goes hand in hand with a talk that I saw recently from Khan Academy's founder, Salkan. It was a recent TED talk that he gave on how they used AI to create a tool for the people using the Khan Academy. If you're not familiar, it's just a teaching platform for people to learn new topics and subjects. And so what they've built is they fine-tuned an AI and created it in such a way that it has two different modes, where it has a student mode and a teacher mode. And based on what mode it's in, if it's on student mode, it tries not to give you the answer directly, but it tries to look at the reasoning of the student. It will ask it question, why do you think so? And then based on its answer, it will then try to guide it or find the gap in knowledge of the student or the user to then help it learn. So we can create tools with the AI to help us learn instead of letting it do our job. I mean, we can be smart about it, right? And that almost becomes like your own personal tutor. I think that's a very good way to look at it. It speeds things up. So yeah, I think based on this, companies should be investing in creating tools with AI. And the last thing I want to touch on is AI creativity. Right now, AI can be creative. You can adjust the temperature, get a bit different answers. But I think there's a discussion to be had in the field of research. When you're looking at a problem and you're trying to figure it out, and someone comes up with a whole new angle of looking at the problem that no one has thought about before, that maybe solves the problem in a more efficient way. That is something that we're not sure, at least I'm not sure, that AI can do yet, because it only knows what we've done, the techniques that we use. If a problem doesn't have a perspective that we never thought about before, how can maybe it can do a trial error, just run it a bunch of times, and then maybe it will stumble onto something, try it all, and then one of them, like a monkey on typewriters, it will find it. But I think that is the next evolution. And so until then, even if AI ends up taking our jobs as developers, if we don't have to babysit them anymore, maybe, then I think there is a proposition to be had that we can become more creative and more research-oriented and having research teams to figure out new solutions to problems that we have. And I think that's why we shouldn't be too scared of AI and try to be smart about it and use it in efficient ways. So I will pass on to Naval, who has the next piece.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Naval, and I work as a junior software developer with Bertan at Net Company. Just give me a quick second. I have a demo coming up, and I am just going to quickly run all my things. All right, I think we're ready to go. Let's start. So, as a junior software developer, a typical day at work for me usually looks like a mix of meetings, some coding tasks. But in the first few months when I initially joined, about 3 months, I also found myself spending a lot of time trying to read documentation. Right now, I work with a client where we handle about 14 different portals. And we are a team of 20, but even then, the huge amount of documentation to understand the project, it was overwhelming. So my first question to you is, have you ever found yourself lost in a sea of documentation? Or at least when you were juniors. Yes? Yeah? So the typical feeling is you start reading one document, find out it refers to 5 others, and then 5 others, and you just go down the rabbit hole, and yeah, you're lost. So what solution do we have to this? When I am reading documentation, I'm not only trying to understand what it's saying about the code, but I'm also trying to figure out what is the business logic behind this. How are users actually going to be using the functionality I'm creating, and how does it make a real-world impact, right? And oftentimes, it's really common practice to just turn to seniors, isn't it? We have so many questions, and we turn to our seniors who are seen as a living embodiment of our knowledge of all the documentation in the project. So let's just face the reality. Sometimes even seniors do not have time nor all the answers. So all this documentation can make seniors also feel really unequipped to answer questions, especially when it's about 14 different portals. So now let's imagine a scenario where you could actually chat with your documentation, where you could converse with it in natural language, and you could ask it questions and it would answer back with exactly what you need, down to the very line where you can find certain information in your documentation. That is very interesting because you would be getting answers at a granular level, and say it could also make connections between different documents for you, so you wouldn't have to read through all the different ones. That's where LLMs jump in. They sort of provide a portal into your documentation, and it transforms the documentation reading process from simply informative to interactive and engaging. You're talking to them, you're learning by doing instead of simply reading. So how would you actually use LLMs to do this? Before I jump into how I'm going to do it, I just wanted to introduce a little bit of my tech stack and a general overview of what my proof of concept is going to be about. So my general idea is to just streamline this documentation reading process. And I want to be able to sort of feed my document and have it cut up into chunks, because as we know, GPT has a token limit, so you cannot send your entire document all at once. And after that, we sort of send the context, the chunk as a context with your query or whatever question you have about the document, right? And I'll show the behind the scenes of how that works. So I want to point out two of the main libraries that really make my life easy when I'm trying to do this. First is Chroma. So Chroma is a vector database. It was initially used by recommender systems because it was able to create word-to-vector embeddings and then find comparable ones. So for example, trying to find similar users or similar movie titles in a system, right? We are using this to sort of extend the memory of our large language model, as in we create an illusion of infinite memory, because now you have an entire vector database with all your chunks in there, and you simply pass on the chunk that contains the context for your query. And the second one I want to point out is LangChain. It became popular recently. It basically allows you to sort of combine different models, say a speech recognition model with a large language model. So that would allow you to very literally converse or talk with your document. Though that I have not been able to include that in my prototype, I do use it because it provides a nice wrapper around OpenAI's API to sort of easily create the chatbot, right? So without further ado, let me jump into my prototype. Okay, 1 second. So just for context, I am using Colab. This is simply because it's much easier to use compute resources online, so I'm not using my local resources. But yes, I have my Python notebook running now. I'm not going to go into the details of a lot of how the basic things work, but it's simple. I have some Python packages I've installed, and I'm mounting my Google Drive onto my Colab. Sorry, there's some technical difficulties. Can I use this?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
There we go.
Maybe click once to activate it if it's not working.
Okay, there we go. That's much better. Right. So simple, and I have fed it my API key. I also have my persist directory. This is where my vector database is being stored. But now let's get into the fun part. When I feed my document into my program, it cuts it up into chunks of 1,000 tokens. So to those of you who are not very familiar with how word-to-vector embeddings work, if we assume that we have a 2D vector space, then each chunk would be somewhere in that graph. So say if your document was cut up into 4 different chunks, you would have 4 different points here. Right. Since I already have my document loaded, I'm gonna run this. Okay, so what I've done till now is that I have fed it a document. For now, it's George Orwell's 1984. Christiaan mentioned it initially. So I have loaded it into my vector store. I've already created the embeddings. And I am now going to configure my chatbot. The code over here basically does what I've already mentioned, loading the document, splitting it, and creating embeddings. So if we send in a query, our query is also first going through Chroma. It creates an embedding out of that query, and then Chroma tries to find the closest embedding to it. So in this case, it'll be the first chunk that was 10,9. And it'll send it in, and this will be passed on entirely to Chat GPT as context. And it will basically answer you regularly the way it would if you were just using regular Chat GPT. So to make this a little interesting, I would like someone in the audience to propose a question. The book I have loaded is 1984. I'm hoping some of you might have read it. So yeah, does anyone have a question they want to ask? Go ahead.
So what's the name of the pet of the protagonist?
Okay.
So I think there is one.
let's see, is the name of the right. So I have my question. I have disabled chat history for now. I would like to mention that the chat history counts towards your token limit. So it's not always a good idea to send it unless it's really necessary. Okay, so it seems to be processing. There you go. There is no mention of a pet of the protagonist in the given context. Does anyone have another question, maybe? Yes?
What country are we at war with?
Okay. There we go. I hope that I typed it correctly. Let's go. Oh, yeah. There we go. Let's see. It's making a lot of calls. There you go. So it says at the beginning of the passage, it is stated that there are 3 superstates permanently at war. It mentions the 3 superstates. And yeah, I guess you could try this yourself, which I'll provide you with the Colab notebook at the end of the presentation, so you can always try it yourself. One last thing I'd like to mention is that the fun part about this is that it also gives you the context that it was passed. So you can actually see where it has extracted this from. So you're provided not only with the answer, but also how it got it, which I find very interesting. Let's switch back to the slides. So yeah, that was the demo. It was a bit shaky, but I guess that's fine. So I think the natural question when you see something like this is, what are the pros and cons? Do we actually use this in a professional environment especially? So let me go over the pros quickly. Firstly, efficiency. It's very time-saving. Instead of reading a lot of documentation, all you're doing is going and asking it to sort of explain it to you. And this is not only time-saving, but also it's able to analyze a lot of volume of data, way more than you can in the same amount of time. Then accessibility. This can be extended, as I said, to use speech recognition. So in that case, anyone will be able to simply converse, and you don't have, say, if they're dyslexic people, they don't need to read, they can simply use their voice. And also, it's language independent, which means if you have a diverse team of people, you can simply ask it to reply to you in a certain language, and it'll do so. The other 2 important ones, I'm sorry. Right. So the last one also extends to collaboration and knowledge sharing, where you create a more inclusive and diverse work environment, and it's easy to do knowledge sharing across language barriers. And yeah. And lastly, about NLP and contextual understanding, where it's able to understand what it is you're trying to ask. And it will be able to answer you in a human-like way, which is often much more easy for anyone to digest, especially when there's jargon being used in the documentation, which not everyone is familiar with, or especially as juniors, even I wasn't familiar with. But this also brings us to the cons, where stuff like privacy and security or legal complications come into play. These things, for privacy and security, there are actually a lot of open source large language models being created or already available. So you can easily replace the model, the GPT model I'm using, with any other one, and LangChain actually supports those. So the privacy and security could actually be nullified in a sense. And legal issues are being worked on. There are continuous work, and yeah. But another thing to note is that LLMs or AI is prone to hallucinations, as in if it doesn't know something, it doesn't say that it doesn't know that, and it will come up with an answer. So we cannot totally rely on it. And there's an obvious lack of human judgment in there. So if there is any ambiguity in the documentation, or if it's a very sensitive issue, it's always good to have some human judgment or human perspective in there. And LLMs cannot do that subjective analysis for you yet, at least. So with that, I would like to not take up too much of your time. I hope to have added a little bit more to your arsenal of knowledge about AI and how it works, and you've seen the behind the scenes. And hopefully you'll be able to use this at your workplace. If you want to give my Colab notebook a try, upload your own document and see if it works, it would be, you can scan the QR code, you'll be able to access it. And just make sure this one is using the GPT model, so it will be sending data to OpenAI. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to hand over to Christiaan. And if you have any questions, now is the time.
Yeah, I'm super proud of Bertan and Naval. I think they did a great job at their age at a scary conference, giving a presentation. It's really cool. If everybody has scanned that, wants to scan that, just one more slide. Here are a few of the screencasts that we used for inspiration. I particularly like to point out Lex Fridman. If you don't already know it, he gives really nice screencasts with long interviews of 2 hours, so it's a long sit, but he has all the interesting people like Steve Wozniak. He had Elon Musk on his show. So I really recommend it if you want to dive into this. I think you all want to go home, so I'm not going to take up more of your time. Thank you for being here. It was a pleasure.